Welcome back, dear friends. This is episode number 34 of the Limitation Act. We were dealing with section 15, and in the last episode I cited Xavier versus Lucy v. Papali. There I have to mention one more thing. I will read, that is AER 2002 Kerala 146. Please read. There a decision of the Supreme Court and various High Court and the full bench decision of the Kerala High Court was referred to. The Supreme Court decision which was referred to was AER 2000 Supreme Court 2587. Since it is a principle of merger not only for the purpose of section 15 but for other purposes also it may be required, that is why I am giving importance to that. AER 2000 Supreme Court 2587. And in para 9 of Lucy's case, it was held, I will read. In view of the authoritative pronouncement of the Supreme Court and the full bench decision of this court, it is therefore to be held that when the decree is appealed against, the enforceable decree is that of the appellate court. Whether the appellate court dismisses or varies the judgment of the court below, dismisses the appeal or varies the judgment of the court below, even though the trial court decree may be enforceable in the absence of an interim order of stay granted by the appellate court, that by itself will not show that the period of limitation for executing the decree starts from the date of the trial court decree, because applying the principle of merger, the decree that is executable is that of the appellate court. So viewed, the court below was perfectly right in holding that the petition was not barred by limitation and that the same was filed within time. So the merger principle also we have seen. Next is AER 1984 Supreme Court 1383. In SEC also parallel citation 1984 3 SEC 561. Anandi Lal and another versus Ram Narayan and others. Ram Narayan and others. Section 15 and Article 136 of the Limitation Act, the interpretation. There the question was whether absolute stay or partial stay. That was the question. And paragraph 10 and 11, this discussion is there. And even before that it is said, there is no reason why section 15(1) should be given a restricted meaning as allowing the benefit to the decree holder where there is a complete or absolute stay of execution and not a partial stay. Para 10 and 11. We feel, para 10 I will read one sentence. We feel that there is no justification for placing a rigid construction on a beneficent provision like section 15(1) of the Limitation Act. The rest you may read, I am not reading, it is a long paragraph. Para 11. Agreeing with the full bench, we are inclined to the view that the word execution in section 15(1) embraces all the appropriate means by which a decree is enforced. It includes all processes and proceedings in aid of or supplemental to execution. We find no rational basis for adopting a narrow and restricted construction on a beneficent provision like the one contained in section 15(1). There is no reason why section 15(1) should be given a restricted meaning as allowing the benefit to a decree holder where there is a complete or absolute stay of execution and not a partial stay, that is a stay which makes the decree altogether inexecutable. Nor can we subscribe to the proposition that in case of partial stay, the benefit under section 15(1) can be had only where an execution application is directed against the same judgmentor or the same property as against whom an execution was previously stayed. Stay of any process of execution is therefore stay of execution. This is the point. Stay of any process of execution is stay of execution within the meaning of section 15(1) of the Limitation Act. Where an injunction or order has prevented the decree holder from executing the decree, then irrespective of the particular stage of execution or the particular property against which or the particular judgmentor against whom execution was stayed, the effect of such injunction or order is to prolong the life of the decree itself by the period during which the injunction or order remained in force. The majority view to the contrary, taken by some of the high courts, overlooks the well-settled principle that when the law prescribes more than one modes of execution, it is for the decree holder to choose which of them he will pursue. So it is very clearly stated by the bench of the Supreme Court, two judges, Justice A.P. Sen and Justice Balakrishna Aradi. Very clearly said, Justice Sen's judgment. Very clearly said. Now I will simplify it and say, there are various modes of execution. Section 51 of the Code of Civil Procedure provides for it. There is simultaneous execution. That is, an execution can be had against a person and property of the judgmentor. How? The judgmentor can be arrested and detained in the civil prison as provided in the CPC, section 55 to 58, or his property can be attached and sold in execution. And an elaborate procedure is provided right from Rule 54 of Order 21 to the end of it, almost 104. So it can be simultaneous execution can be had, CPC provides it. But sometimes the court may say not simultaneous, one after the other. That is, in extreme cases the court may say, taking into account the facts and circumstances of each case. Suppose what is stayed by a court in execution is only this: don't arrest him, you may proceed against his property. So when simultaneous execution was attempted, the judgmentor was sought to be arrested, his property was also to be sold. The executing court says that yes, simultaneous execution is possible in this case, no harm. Matter was taken up in revision to the High Court. High Court says, for the time being, no arrest. You don't proceed against the person, you may proceed against the property. So there is no bar of execution being proceeded with, but there is a bar against executing the decree against the person of the judgmentor. That is also stay of execution within the meaning of section 15(1). Or there may be, suppose a decree for payment of money is passed against three persons. Judgment attires 1 to 3. 1 and 2 are penniless. 3 is a very rich man. Ordinarily, what will the decree holder do? The decree holder will proceed against the third judgmentor for realization of the decree about by arrest and detention, or by selling his property. Suppose the third defendant alone files an appeal and stay is confined to the third defendant alone and there is no bar in filing an execution petition against defendants 1 and 2. It is made clear in the order. Still, it is a stay within the meaning of section 15(1). Because it is a provision for the benefit of a party, that is, who has been injuncted or against whom an order of stay or prohibition is passed, is given this benefit of section 15(1). It cannot be curtailed by giving such interpretations, whether partial or absolute, and all those things. Next is AER 2006 Kerala 149. 2006 KHC 159. Hanifa versus United Finance Corporation. I am giving these citations to show under 15.2, 15.1 there applicability of exclusion of limitation. Application for delivery of possession may be an application in proceedings for execution, but it cannot be treated as an application for execution, is the view taken by Justice Ramkumar. It does not attract section 15(1). So, an order prohibiting delivery of possession being taken, Justice Ramkumar says that it is not an order against execution. Period of any order of stay of execution granted by the revisional court is not liable to be excluded from limitation. That is, stay is only against taking delivery. An order in execution passed by the executing court is being challenged in revision, and the property is proceeded against for sale. The revisional court says, High Court says, all right, you proceed with the sale. Let the sale be also confirmed, no harm, if the sale takes place, but don't deliver the property. Don't dispossess the judge meritor. Justice Ramkumar in that decision says that that is not a stay of execution within the meaning of section 15(1). Because then the question is whether that period can be excluded for filing an application under Article 134 is the question. I am not giving any opinion on that. You may read it, find out. Yes. 2012 1 SEC 690, same as AER 2012 Supreme Court 1769, Disha Constructions and others versus State of Goa and another. Period of notice. Here, please carefully read this judgment. The point held various, see the arguments also. A notice was issued to the state. Notice under section 80 is required. That notice was given. 2 months time. That notice, that period will be excluded under section 15(1), the day on which, that is this. I'm sorry. Explanation: excluding the time required for obtaining the consent or sanction of the government or other authority, the date on which the application was made for obtaining consent or sanction, and the date of receipt of the order of the government or authority shall both be excluded for the purpose of computation of the period of limitation. Where a notice is required, here a notice was required. Suppose the period of limitation is 3 years. Notice period is 2 months under section 80. The plaintiff serves the notice under section 80 just on the previous day of the expiry of the period of limitation. Just on the previous day. Take for instance, whether he is entitled to get exclusion of the period of 2 months. The argument in this case was that it must be before, that period must expire before 2 months, something like that. Then the Supreme Court says that then where is the exclusion, which is the benefit that is provided. I will see the Disha construction case. I will read paragraph 14, a portion. We are of the view that the set period of 2 months must be computed and benefit of exclusion of the said 2 months must be given to the appellants even if they had given the said notice within the period of limitation. If the appellants had given the notice after the expiry of period of limitation, say after 30th September 2009, then they could not have been given the benefit in this connection. In this connection, we may refer to the decision of this court in Union of India and others versus West Coast Paper Mills, that is 2000 AER 2004 Supreme Court 3079, referred to in a large number of cases. West Coast Paper Mill, AER 2004 Supreme Court 30, wherein somewhat similar situation, this court has held as follows: any circumstance, legal or factual, which inhibits entertainment or consideration by the court of the dispute on the merits comes within the scope of the section, and a liberal touch must inform the interpretation of the Limitation Act, which deprives the remedy of one who has a right. Then para 15 there, I am not reading. Para 16, in our view, please carefully, in our view, proper interpretation of section 15(2) of the Act would be that in computing the period of limitation, the period of notice, provided notice is given within the limitation period, would be mandatorily excluded. That would mean that a suit for which a period of limitation is 3 years would be within limitation even if it is filed within 2 months after 3 years, provided notice had been given within the limitation period. In such a case, the period of notice cannot be counted concurrently with the period of limitation. That was the argument. If that is done, then the period of notice is not excluded. Any other interpretation would be contrary to the express mandate of section 15(2) of the Act. So the requirement is that where notice is compulsory, for example under section 80 or in a special statute which provides for a notice before instituting a suit, Port Trust Act for example, there that notice should be issued before the expiry of the period of limitation. And once it is issued, that period of 2 months or 1 month, whatever it is, can be added along with the period of limitation. So if it is filed within 3 months and 2 months, 3 years and 2 months as in this case, it will be well within time. That is a principle. Next is AER 2003 NOC Kerala, Notes on Cases Kerala 489. Full report is 2003 Kerala High Court Cases 69. Union of India versus Kerala State Small Scale Industries Development and Employment Corporation Limited. It is reported in KLT also, 2003 1 KLT 414. Suit against railways for damages for loss of goods in transit. Plaintiff gets an additional 2 months time to file the suit because 2 months is the notice period, section 80. Para 4 and 6. Para 6 is a long paragraph, I will read a few sentences. Therefore, prior to the amendment of section 80, if a suit was filed before the expiry of 2 months period, the suit had to be dismissed as held by the Supreme Court in Bihari Chowdhury versus State of Bihar, AER 1984, Supreme Court 1043. But after the 1976 amendment, the proviso to subsection 2 of section 80 requires the court to return the plaintiff to present the same after complying with the requirements of subsection 1 if the court feels that there is no urgency. In this case, the trial court did not return the plaintiff under the proviso to subsection 2 of section 80 but granted the permission. According to me, while exclusion of time is given by the statutory provision under section 15(2) of the Limitation Act, the discretion as to whether the plaintiff should be allowed to file the suit dispensing with such notice is by a judicial order. If the court was not inclined to grant that permission, it could have returned the plaintiff, which could be represented on the last date of the period of 2 months after adding the original period of 3 years, Therefore, any omission by the court to do that cannot deprive the plaintiff of the statutory benefit extended by section 15(2) of the Act. If there was no such proviso to subsection 2 of section 80, then there is no merit in the contention. So and so. If there was no such proviso to sub-rule 2 of section 80, then there is merit in the contention. Then there is merit in the contention of the learned counsel for the appellant that once the notice period is dispensed with and the suit is filed after the period of 3 years, it is barred by limitation. Otherwise, that period is to be provided. We have seen all throughout, this is a benefit granted. You cannot curtail that benefit. And it is also well settled that two principles are well settled. There is no equitable consideration while dealing with the limitation. I say, all right, inequity, just give him that benefit. No. But where two interpretations are possible on the question of limitation, the interpretation which is favorable to the suitor should be adopted. These are all well settled principles. Next is AER 1991 Kerala 80. It is also reported in 1990 KHC 392 TPK Nair versus Union of India. Statutory notice as against any one of the defendants is enough when a suit is jointly filed against several defendants. This is another point. There are several defendants. And their notice under section 80 or any other statutory notice is required only against one of the defendants. And such notice was given. Whether that period of notice, namely 2 months, can be extended as against all. Yes, it is available. It is true that when a suit has been instituted against several defendants, one of whom is a government or a public officer, and notice under the section has not been given, the whole suit is not bad. Of course, true. But in order to claim the exemption under section 15(2) of the Limitation Act, it is not necessary that the requirement of statutory notice is there against all the defendants. When a suit is jointly filed against several defendants, in order to get the exclusion of the period under 15(2) for the entire suit, it is enough that the statutory notice is required as against any one of the defendants. But in a case where the state or a public officer is an unnecessary or improper party and there is no cause of action against them and they were implicated without bona fides or by mistaken feeling regarding existence of a cause of action, the exclusion is not available. In this case, all the defendants are necessary parties and hence these questions do not arise. Therefore, the exclusion is available for the entire suit. I find the suit is well within time. This by Justice Padmanabhan. TPK Nair versus Union of India. And the rest of it we will see in the next episode. Thank you.